Welcome back to Never Enough Novels. It's time for another reading wrap-up where I'm going to give you short and sweet book reviews of every single book that I read last month. In April, I managed to get through 12 books from a variety of different genres, so I have lots of book reviews to share with you today. I'm going to go through the ones I finished at the beginning of the month all the way up through the ones that I just recently finished and give you my star rating and my quick thoughts on each book. I'll also put the links to all of the books down below in the description so you can grab any from Amazon or Target if you're interested and help support this channel along the way. Also, make sure you hit like and subscribe to my channel so you can see more of these book review videos in the future. Since we have so many books to get through, let's dive right in. First up is a book called The Mysterious Bakery on Rue de Paris, and a huge thanks to One More Chapter for sending this my way. I had heard of this author before, but never actually read anything by her, but I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's like a quintessential French romance. So our main character is Edie, and she takes a job which she thinks is at a bakery in downtown Paris, but ends up being at in a smaller town that's just outside of the city. So it's not quite the start that she was hoping for, but as she spends more time in this town and gets to know the people and gets to know the prickly owner of the bakery a little bit better, she starts to realize that this might be just exactly what she's hoping for. So there's a little bit of romance, there's a little bit of a mystery with the baker in the basement who she's trying to find more information about, but no one really wants to talk about. So there's a little bit of a secret there. And there's a lot of history in this town and with this bakery. And you get so many sights and sounds and smells descriptions. So it feels like you're actually there, traveling through the streets of this small French town and inside of the bakery. So I loved that aspect of it. There's also a lot of actual French scattered throughout within the pages of this book. So not enough that you won't be able to understand it, but as someone who took French in college, it was fun to kind of see that language in this book as well. So again, this was just the perfect small town French romance if that's something that you're interested in. The next book I read is one of the hottest books of spring and summer. That's the new Abby Jimenez romance, and it's called Say You'll Remember Me. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. But I've seen a lot of mixed reviews on this one, so I was lucky enough that for me it was an absolute hit, but I know there's plenty of other people who did not enjoy it. And I think the reason for that is it's a pretty heavy book. So Abby's books always have a healthy dose of reality in them. They're not just charming, happily ever after romances. The characters kind of go through a lot on the way to getting their love story, and that was definitely the case in this one. So our 2 main characters are Xavier and Samantha, and they meet in Minnesota, I think, and have this amazing first date. They know it's going to be something special, but Samantha is leaving the next day for good. So she's moving to California to be with her family because her mom has dementia and it's progressing fairly quickly. So she wants to be there with her mom and help her family as her caregiver. So she's never planning to see Xavier again, and she basically tells him just forget about me, forget this ever happened, and we'll both move on with our lives. But of course they can't really do that because of this incredible first date and the connection that they feel. They kind of get back in touch after a while and decide to try a long distance, but life just keeps throwing them all these obstacles, and it feels like it's just really hard for them to get together or to see each other. So I mean, within this romance book, we're seeing a lot of the realities of long distance relationships and how tough it can be to fight for the person that you're supposed to be with. So I think for a lot of people, it just felt too hard and too difficult to see these characters go through so many really tough situations and know that they are meant to be together, but it just feels like it's impossible at this moment in time. For some people, I think that just wasn't exactly the fun summer romance that they were hoping for, but I personally love that aspect of it because I felt like it showed how people can make an effort and what you can do if you're truly looking for your person, and sometimes you have to overcome really difficult obstacles to be with them. So I thought she did a great job showing the realities of that situation, and ultimately it made the payoff and them getting together at the end so much more worthwhile because you just saw how much effort they put into it. So I highly recommend this one, but I'll give you all of those caveats. If it doesn't sound like something you'd be interested in, then definitely skip it because a lot of other people did not enjoy it as much. But for me, it was a really well-written romance that kind of just showed the true realities of love, and I thought the ultimate payoff and how the book wrapped up was wonderful and so exciting and definitely worth the journey to get there. Another really popular romance that I read was called Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage, and this is the 4th book in her Rebel Blue Ranch series. So these are cowboy romances, which honestly I never thought I would be that interested in, but Lila does an amazing job just writing romance in general, and I have like fallen head over heels for this entire series. I would recommend probably reading them in order. Like, they're mostly standalones, but there's a lot of interconnections with the characters, and you kind of get a little bit of history from the 2 main characters in book 4 from like the previous books. So I think they're better enjoyed in order. The first one's done and dusted if you're interested in that. But this was such a bittersweet read because I'm really sad to say goodbye to these characters. Like, it's definitely going to be the last book in the series. But this was a 5-star read for me. She just continues to knock it out of the park. So our 2 main characters in this one are Dusty and Cam. Like I said, we know a little bit about them from the previous books, and basically Dusty has been pining over Cam for their entire lives, but a whole set of circumstances like just never made it the right time. So this is like a second chance romance now that Cam is back in town and unattached for the first time in ages. So Dusty is basically given another shot to prove to her that he is worthwhile and can love her in a way that she absolutely deserves, even though she doesn't necessarily believe that or want to put down her walls around him. But just seeing these 2 kind of slowly get back in touch and build their friendship again and then have it develop into something more was incredibly satisfying. And it just had all of the characteristics that I've loved from this series so far. So highly, highly recommend it. Like I said, I don't normally do cowboy romances. It's not a genre or a trope that I was particularly interested in the past, but there's like definitely that aspect of it, but it's just a really solid all-around romance book. And the series starts with Done and Dusted, so you can check that out first and then absolutely enjoy all of the 4 books equally. Apparently April was full of romance books from some of my favorite authors, because the next one is another go-to author for me, and that's Katherine. And her new book for this summer is called The Love Haters. And again, this is one that I was really anticipating and hoping for, but I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. So this was my lowest rated book of the entire month. I like detested it. It was terrible. And I hate to say that because normally she writes clean romances and I just love her stories and kind of what the characters go through. But this one just had none of her signature depth or well-written plots. Like, the main story is about a journalist, video editor who takes an assignment that she really shouldn't be a part of. So it's to cover this Coast Guard like hero and basically create a video for the Coast Guard to help with recruitment. But as part of the job, you need to be able to swim and like be comfortable around water. But our main character has a big fear of water and has no idea how to swim. And she's also got some like body image issues as well. So even the idea of getting into a swimsuit kind of terrifies her. So that's like this big plot point at the beginning of the book. But she takes the assignment anyway in the hopes to like save her job. And as it turns out, the guy that she's covering, this like hero, is of course like the perfect book boyfriend. Like, he's amazing, but he's pretty grumpy and like never talks to anyone else except for our main character. So like all of a sudden he turns into this completely different person, it seems like. And like they fall head over heels for each other. And all of a sudden he teaches her how to swim, and like this big plot point just completely goes away and basically is like never brought up again. So that whole thing was really weird. And then they get into this strange set of circumstances where like this big hurricane comes through, and so like he's a part of the Coast Guard, so she knows he's unavailable during this hurricane, but she goes to save his dog out on his houseboat and like gets swept out to sea in the middle of a hurricane. Like, just makes terrible life choices, and then it wraps up in a way that like of course she's saved and of course she gets over all of her issues and they end up together. And like, there were just so many things that happened in the book that I was like, what is going on? Like, there's also a fake relationship thrown in there with the guy's brother, and like so many different plot points and tropes were thrown into this one romance book, and none of it made sense. And I think I'm just more upset because normally I like Katherine books a lot, and I don't know what happened with this one. Hopefully her next book will be a lot better, but as you can tell, even trying to describe this one is kind of a mess. So I'll still keep trying her new books in the future, but this is one that you probably just want to skip. The one fantasy I read this month was called A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by J. Penner, and this was actually just re-released as a new deluxe edition, so it's got like these beautiful sprayed edges, a newly designed cover, and there's also like illustrations in it, so it's really a really cool book. I would highly recommend getting this version while you can. But this is a cozy fantasy, and I absolutely loved it. I was just completely swept away by the story, and I devoured it in like 2 days. So I gave this one 4 stars, but it's great for anyone who's a fan of the Great British Bake Off show, because our main character participates in a baking competition that's very similar to that show. So our main character is named Arletta, and she is a human who has been kind of struggling on her own after her parents died. So she uses her baking to basically survive, but her neighbors enter her into this like magical baking competition, and she is accepted to everyone's surprise because no human has ever even been accepted into the competition before. It's usually like elves or gnomes or other species. So Arletta is kind of facing like terrible odds because she knows that she does not have as good of a chance of winning this, but if she wins, it will like solve a lot of problems for her. Along the way, Arletta meets a handsome elf who was assigned to come and collect her and basically show her where to go and get her into the competition. And they form this really sweet friendship that maybe turns into something more. And she also meets a few other participants in the competition who become these really close friends. There's also some less friendly competitors as well, which create a little tension in the book. But overall, it's a really sweet and charming story about this woman who finds herself in a situation she never expected and kind of develops the confidence to perform her best, as well as sort of opens up her world to let people in, which when she's been like closed off for most of her life after her parents died. So I just loved everything about this. It's definitely like a sweet, cozy fantasy. If you normally like those type of books, you're definitely going to love this one as well. And it's the first book in a series, so the rest of the books are also getting like this new deluxe edition makeover, so you can keep an eye out for those later this year as well. One of the audiobooks I listened to this month is called Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall, and this showed up on my radar because it was a Reese's Book Club selection. So it's more of like a general fiction book, which is not normally a genre that I get into that much, but I saw it was a selection by her and the story sounded generally interesting, so I gave it a try. I'm glad I did. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I was pretty riveted by the audiobook, and I think that's because the story takes place in 2 different timelines and you keep jumping back and forth between them as like the story unfolds, which kept the pace pretty quick and kept you like invested in the story. So it's a bit of a sordid love triangle between our main character Beth and the 2 men in her life. So back in the early 1950s, Beth fell in love with the neighbor boy Gabriel, and as the story unfolds, we kind of find out more about how they got together and then ultimately like what separated them. But in the 1960s, where we pick up as like the current day, Beth has married Frank, and we find out that they had a son at one point, but a tragic accident occurred, and Beth and Frank are now just living, by themselves again and still trying to grapple with the grief of losing their son. So in this timeline, Gabriel shows back up in town and he has his own son in tow. And like Beth is very happy with Frank and loves him and loves the life that they've created. But Gabriel presents this kind of new temptation again, and she can't deny that she's basically like falling in love with him all over again. But can a person really love 2 people? There's also the wrinkle of Gabriel's son, who does not have his mother, and Beth kind of presents like a motherly figure as well. And as the book goes on, we find out that there has been a murder, but we don't know who was killed or who did it. So there's also a piece of the story where Frank is on trial for murder, and we know something is off about this whole story, and we're not really sure like what happened or how it all went down. So there's the intensity of that murder trial aspect, as well as the love triangle that is unfolding between these 3 people. So I think all of those things kept this book pretty riveting, and I just really enjoyed reading about all the different emotions that come with this. I thought the characters were really well written and the plot unfolded in a way that just kept your attention, so this is one that I highly recommend. I also read a few thrillers this month, and the first one was called The Last Flight by Julie Clark, I think is her last name. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I just picked it up on a whim at the library, and it turned out to be a really intriguing concept. So the book is about 2 women who meet at an airport and decide to swap identities. So for different reasons that slowly unfold over time, we realize why these women are running away and like what they're running away from. And basically over the course of the story, we find out more about each of these women and the lives that they created for themselves. One of them is leaving an abusive situation. So she had set up this entire plan to create a new identity and get away from her husband for good, but that fell through. So she was kind of desperate and needed a new way out. The other woman's story unfolds a little bit slower. We find out more about her over the course of the entire book, but she also has reasons that she is leaving like a dangerous situation behind. And when they meet at the airport and like make this momentous decision to switch identities, they take off on separate planes to different destinations, and one of those planes crashes. So we're trying to piece together like what happens to the other woman and how she's dealing with the fallout of this plane crash, and we're not entirely sure what happened with the woman who was supposed to be aboard that plane. The whole story only takes place over maybe like a week in the aftermath of the one plane crash, and then we get snippets going back in time to hear more about both women and their histories, over the course of the book as well. I feel like those timelines made the book really fast-paced, and I was honestly flipping through so quickly to try and find out what happened. And there were some unique connections that I didn't see coming, and a plot twist at the end that like took me completely by surprise. I like shut the book and was just floored at what happened. Even though this is an older thriller, it's one that I just happened to pick up, but I highly recommend it, and it's great for anyone who wants like a fast-paced plot with a few unique points that you don't normally see in other books. Another thriller that just came out in 2025 is called Close Your Eyes and Count to 10 by Lisa Unger. And this was another hit for me. I also gave this 4.5 stars. The concept initially was really intriguing because it's about a mom who decides to go on this kind of reality competition show where basically this like popular reality star sets up a hide and seek competition with really high stakes. So whoever makes it to the end of the competition and hasn't been found yet will win $1 million. So our main character, Adele, is a mom to 2 kids, and she desperately needs the money as a single mom. So one of her kids like shows her this competition and she agrees to give it a shot. So she's flown to this remote island, and the competition is taking place at this old resort that's in like a serious state of decay. And she's there with a few other competitors as well as obviously the production team. And the story jumps back and forth between a bunch of different character perspectives. So we hear more about the person who's like hosting the show and his team, as well as more about Adele and the other participants. And each of them have very different reasons for being there and kind of have their own history. So there's a lot going on with the reality star and his team. And eventually someone ends up dead, and we are not sure why or how, but clearly there are more sinister things happening on this island than what we expect. So what starts out as a game for money ends up turning into kind of a game for survival. On top of that, there's also this threat of a huge storm that's coming in, which is basically going to cut them off from everyone, and also presents this really dangerous situation on the island due to flooding and high winds and a structure that is not stable and like could potentially collapse at any minute. So the stakes are really high, and it felt like there was a lot of like thrilling moments as we kind of came to the conclusion about how the story would end. Honestly, the best part about this book was just the different characters and hearing more about their motivations and what was going on that kind of led them to this point in time. There wasn't a whole lot of plot dedicated to the actual competition, which is kind of different than what I expected, but it honestly didn't detract from my enjoyment of the book at all. There was enough else going on that I was really invested in each of these characters' stories and what eventually happened, like with the storm and the danger that they found themselves in. So although it's a fairly common trope in thrillers to be like in the middle of a storm and cut off from civilization, the other aspects of this book set it apart from similar thrillers and made it still absolutely worth the read. Back on the romance side, another audiobook that I listened to this month was called Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver. This is the second book in her Ruinous Love trilogy. So the first one is Butcher and Blackbird, which I read last month and absolutely loved. This one was not as good. I ended up giving it 3 stars, which honestly might have been generous. I think a big part of the reason was just the audiobook format that I listened to. Honestly, it felt like someone was giggling or laughing on audio like every 5 seconds, and it drove me absolutely crazy. If I hear the narrator saying the words like she giggled or she laughed, I don't also need the other narrator to like actually laugh on track. So that drove me crazy. There were also moments where the one character sang a lot. So she was legit like singing made up songs on the audiobook as well. Normally I just like skim over those parts in the actual books. So it was really weird to hear it like sung out loud. I just didn't need that in my audiobook. So there were little things that just like really drove me crazy with the audiobook version. But overall, the story definitely just wasn't as good as Butcher and Blackbird either. I liked the two main characters and their romance, but it just felt like there were a lot of similarities to the previous book, and almost like she was just kind of using the same formula but trying to create a whole new book out of it. There are now 3 books in this series, and I've heard a lot of people say that this second book was their least favorite out of the trilogy, so I'm still planning to read the 3rd book as well. But honestly, you could skip right over this one probably and go straight from book 1 to book 3 and not miss anything. On a different note, a romance that I surprisingly liked a lot was called Heavy Hitter by Katie Cotugno, and this was on my radar because it was in one of my TBR jar videos from earlier this year, so it had been on my physical TBR to read, and I finally read it in April. It is a very short book. I think it's like 220 pages, so it's a super quick read, and it's a baseball romance, making it just like perfect for this time of year. It is also very heavily Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce coded, so I personally liked that aspect a lot, but I know that's not going to be for everyone. But the book is about, a celebrity who is essentially Taylor Swift and a blossoming relationship with kind of an aging baseball player. So between the two of them, they're just facing all these different obstacles of her being in the press and absolutely known by everyone, and him kind of facing the end of his career. So he's a little bit older and he's not sure if she's actually like falling for him or if this is just a fling or what's going on. So watching the two of them navigate this unique situation and kind of how she handles being a worldwide pop star and what that means for her life, I thought that was really interesting just to see how some of the logistics played out and the things that she had to think about when she was entering into like a new romance. But these two were really cute together, and it was a lot of fun reading about their romance. Like I said, I understand that this isn't going to be for everyone, but if you like the idea of kind of a Taylor Swift romance that was actually well written and funny, and I've read a few that are really bad, so this was definitely much higher up there. I did give this one 4.5 stars, so again, really liked it, and it was a really quick read, so it's an easy one to add to your TBRs. The last thriller I read this month is called The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and I have been trying to get through his entire backlist because I really like his thrillers. They always have some unique aspect that kind of sets them apart from other ones that I've read. So this came up on Libby and decided to finally give it a chance. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Overall, it was pretty enjoyable. It definitely has Rear Window vibes from Alfred Hitchcock. So if you're familiar with that story or like that movie, then this would definitely be worth giving a try. So our main character is Casey, who is recently widowed, and she's been holed up at her family's lake house, basically trying to escape from the world. She has a major drinking problem, which plays a pretty important role in the book. So while she's kind of hunkered down in her house, she meets the neighbors across the lake, and she also kind of starts spying on them. So the wife gives her this sort of coded message that her husband is only with her for her money, and basically like she can never leave him because her husband wouldn't let her basically take all that money away. So Casey's suspicious of their relationship, and she sees something one night that she's not entirely sure what it is, but she thinks the wife might be in danger. And then the wife disappears. So now Casey is trying to figure out, did the husband actually murder his wife so he could take her money? Or did the wife leave and go home like he's telling everyone else? She gets the police involved, but obviously her drinking problem and the fact that she's been spying on this house creates a lot of situations where they cannot trust what she's saying or don't necessarily believe everything she's saying. So this sets off a chain of events as we try to find out what happened to the wife and who is really at fault here. So I like that unreliable narrator aspect, and also trying to kind of unravel what truly happened in Casey's life. And I feel like the last 15 or 20% of the book was so fast paced. There were all these different reveals that happened about what had actually gone down with Casey's husband and with the couple across the lake. So there was a lot of exciting moments at the end of the book, which just really paid off well and made it a really interesting story. Overall, it wasn't the most incredible thriller I've ever read, but definitely an entertaining read and absolutely worth giving a shot if you like that type of story. And the final book that I finished in April just last night is called The Striker by Anna Huang. And I love this author, but I didn't realize that her first sports romance was 570 pages long. Honestly, like that's just insane to me to have a romance. Anything over like 350 is probably unnecessary. But since I love this author so much, I was like, well, I'm still going to give this a try. And I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. It honestly did not feel like it was more than 300 pages because I was just flying through this one. I think I read it in like 3 or 4 nights because I was just so hooked on the story. So it's about a soccer player in the Premier League in England, and he goes to a new team and immediately clashes with one of the other players. They have kind of a long history of animosity between them. So over the summer, the two of them are forced to take training lessons together, and their teacher is a ballet instructor who turns out to be the other guy's sister. So our main character, Asher, is not only forced to spend the summer with his rival, he also is now intrigued by his rival's like sister, and there's definitely like an instant attraction between them, but he knows that she is absolutely off limits for so many different reasons. But then something happens and his rival, Vincent, can no longer participate in the training. So now Asher and Scarlett are kind of left alone for the summer. And of course, there is reasons why both of them do not want to actually enter into any sort of relationship. Obviously, like the brother is a factor, the publicity is a factor, their actual jobs come into play. So there's all these different obstacles and reasons why they shouldn't be together. But, you know, over the course of the summer, more things happen and start to develop. And I just loved everything about these two. And this one actually had like a lot of plot in it. There was a few spicy scenes, of course, because this is an Anna book, but it didn't feel like too much. Just everything was like perfectly laid out, and there was just enough of it that it kept me hooked the entire time. So despite the fact that this is an insane 570 pages, I still highly recommend it. And I know there's going to be another book. I'm pretty sure Vincent will be the main character in the next one, so like another sports romance from Anna. There were also some little snippets of characters from her previous series, like the Twisted Love series and her Kings of Sin series. And I loved seeing them pop up as well because I adore like all of those other books as well. So this was a really fun book from her. Again, I highly recommend it, especially if you like sports romances. Don't be intimidated by the size. I promise you'll fly through it a lot faster than you expect, but definitely one that I'm going to recommend. So thanks for sticking around if you've made it to the end. That is all 12 books that I managed to finish in April. If you want to see more of these videos in the future, make sure you hit subscribe to my channel. And if you want to check out what I read last month, you can head here to see my short and sweet reviews from the books that I read in March.